You're wrong when you say I hate Hulkamania. I dislike you. Vince McMahon didn't say a word for decades while whispers and news stories accused him. Now though, he finally speaks out about Hulk Hogan's use of steroids, which is making waves in the wrestling world. It's also bad. McMahon pulls back the curtain on wrestling's golden age with an honest confession that goes deeper than most people imagined. He reveals secrets, regrets, and a truth that tarnishes the legend of Hulkamania. What took place behind the scenes? Why did Hogan lie on TV for everyone to see? How dark did it get inside the empire Vince built? There was a storm going on behind the curtain. In American pop culture, the early 1990s were a time of strange shows. Heroes in neon gear ruled TV. Action movies ruled the box office, and professional wrestling, run by the World Wrestling Federation (WWF), stood in the middle of both. Kids looked up to these people that were bigger than life. Adults were amazed at how silly and staged it all was. Hulk Hogan, the industry's golden boy, stood tall above them all. But far from the pumped-up muscles and roaring arenas, a much less exciting thing was happening. A slow, poisonous leak that would eventually bring down Vince McMahon's business. McMahon is the chairman and former CEO of WWE World Wrestling Entertainment. There were long-running rumors that the WWF's biggest stars, men with impossible bodies and never-ending schedules, were getting help from more than just protein shakes and hard work. It's always been a trick show in the wrestling business, but this time it wasn't about the stories. The whispers were no longer hiding behind the scenes. The talk was about human biology. George Zorian, a seemingly ordinary ringside doctor from Pennsylvania, was being looked into by the Department of Justice in 1991. He had worked in the shadows of professional wrestling's top, giving out anabolic drugs like aspirin. Zorian had become a regular backstage at WWF events in the 1980s. He was being tried at that time for selling illegal steroids to professional wrestling. He could be trusted, kept things quiet, and most importantly, he had connections. As soon as the government started to tighten its grip, names were being called. Subpoenas were being made out of confidential lists. Then a name slammed into the room like a bomb. Hulk Hogan. The scandal that followed was not only about the law but also about religion. For a lot of people, Hogan wasn't just a wrestler. He was a guide to stay healthy. He told the kids to work out and say their prayers. People began to wonder if those vitamins were really steroids. The spotlight got brighter as the probe went deeper, and federal prosecutors started to focus on Vince McMahon himself. The press came down. The newspapers went crazy. Wrestling was used to having plans for every move, but now it was caught in a real-life drama it couldn't handle. How about Vince McMahon? He stopped talking. McMahon was known for taking over microphones, changing history, and controlling his company's story with a godlike grip. His failure to participate was a message in and of itself. Was it a plan, trying to stay alive, or was he just waiting? Looking at? He stood back and let the dominoes fall until he knew where to stand. As the months went by, pressure inside the WWF grew. Sponsors became tense. Parents started to keep their kids safe. The wrestlers were asked to go to depositions. But Vince, who built this kingdom of show business, wouldn't even hint at being vulnerable or responsible to the public. The business was always getting ready to fall apart. It wasn't just illegal drugs that were found in the steroid affair. It was about how the idea of wrestling itself was falling apart. If the most famous person in the world, Hulk Hogan, was lying, what else was fake? It wasn't just a matter of fighting. It was a crisis for culture. Even though it's been more than 30 years, that storm is still remembered in wrestling history. It's a story told through court records, fan arguments, and broken trust. But now Vince McMahon has finally spoken. He is older and may feel freer to think about things. And what he says in the Netflix documentary W24's The McMahon Story is more than just a memory, it's a whole new world. He says he told Hogan. He says Hogan didn't listen when he told him to tell the truth. Then all of a sudden, one of wrestling's biggest secrets has a new part. Because maybe, just maybe, this storm could have been stopped before it hit land if Vince had been telling the truth back then. The mess with Arsenio Hall was looked at again in June 1991. It was set up to be a lesson in how to fix damage done by the media. Hulk Hogan, the biggest star in the WWE, was set to make a big appearance on the Arsenio Hall show. Steroids were a big deal at that point. It was on the front page. A few days ago, Dr. George Zorian was found guilty of giving anabolic steroids to athletes. Hogan's name was brought up right away in the scandal. The air was tense, the illusion was breaking down, and Vince McMahon was said to be worried. He is never one to give up control of a story. According to McMahon, who recently talked about this in the Netflix documentary WWFB, the McMahon story, he told Hogan exactly what to do. Be honest. It's really simple. Tell the truth. He would tell Hogan the truth if Hogan didn't want to. Behind closed doors before the show, he yelled, "I'm exposing him now. Need to know what those vitamins were." Now that we look back, those words sound like a warning bell that wasn't heeded. At that time, Hogan had to do something that was impossible. His brand was worth a lot of money and included merchandise, action figures, advertising deals, and a lot of young fans who were easy to influence. His job, the company, and the carefully crafted moral identity he had worn like armor for almost a decade could all be in danger if he came clean. But Vince's advice wasn't about how to handle the law. It looked good. For a long time, McMahon knew how important it was to know how people saw him. He thought that a forced statement would hurt a lot less than being exposed in the media or being charged in court. But Hogan went a different way, either out of fear, pride, or a stupid mistake. The crowd went wild when Hogan walked onto Arsenio Hall's set. People still loved him, thought of him as a hero, and thought of him as Hulk. Some people, like directors, publicists, and lawyers, were holding their breath behind the scenes. While he was sitting under the bright lights, Hogan gave what at first seemed like a confident show. Then Arsenio asked the question that everyone was dying to hear. Had Hogan ever taken steroids? Hogan thought about it for a second. Then he gave his answer. When they were allowed in 1983 and 1984, I tried steroids about 3 times to get better after getting hurt. It was an answer meant to get the ball rolling. In a way, it wasn't a denial, but it also wasn't the truth, at least not the whole truth. In his attempt to keep the story under control, Hogan accidentally set it on fire. The public's response was quick and harsh. Within hours, shocked fans filled the radio and newspapers. Hogan's brown, cartoonish body didn't look like someone who had tried a few times almost 10 years before. Experts had their say. The bodybuilders laughed. Medical experts said the comment didn't make sense. What the news called it was a failed cover-up. Hogan would come to deeply regret that night over the years that followed, calling it one of the worst decisions he had ever made. It was meant to protect his image, but the segment made it worse. The WWF's efforts to hide the truth about the scandal failed. Then came lawsuits. The people in Congress looked at the sport with more interest. The false impression of innocence was broken for good. Even back then, Vince McMahon stood his ground, which says more. According to people who know Vince, he knew right away that Hogan had not taken his advice. Vince could have swooped in to save him, but he let him twist instead. It wasn't about them. It was a strategy. During recent talks and in the McMahon story, Vince hasn't tried to hide the truth. He told Hogan a simple thing: you are on your own if you are going to lie. This cold lack of emotion points to something more serious. Since Vince was already being looked at by the law, he may have seen Hogan's mistake as both a cover and a sacrifice. If Hogan took the heat, the company might be able to avoid being charged by the federal government. Vince might be able to say that the stars worked on their own, and that he as the promoter wasn't really in charge after all. It was a big change for a man who had been in charge of every muscle move, promo line, and character story. Even so, McMahon seemed to leave Hogan and fate to their own devices during this dangerous time. Not only did Hogan's job change with his appearance on Arsenio Hall, but the whole wrestling business changed with it. People started to question not only one man but also the system, overnight. How many other people were using? Who let them? And how far did the corruption go? Within a year, the WWF would be facing federal charges, grand jury meetings, and a full-on trial. There would be charges against Vince McMahon for planning to give steroids to his acts. Even though he was found not guilty in the end, the WWE's reputation was badly hurt. But now that he is away, McMahon seems almost unfazed, resigned, or even amused by how everything went wrong. He didn't feel bad about finally telling the truth about Hogan's mistake with the media. It has the calm of a man who made it through the storm and finally feels safe enough to talk. The Zahorian link in the noose of the grand jury. The public saw Hulk Hogan's talk with Arsenio Hall, but the real threat to the World Wrestling Federation was happening in courtrooms and behind closed doors. Dr. George T. Zahorian III, a doctor working in the ring, was at the center of it all. His access, power, and carelessness were so bad that they almost brought Vince McMahon's company down. Zahorian was more than just a doctor with a notepad and pen. In the late 1980s, he let people into the groups that made WWF what it was: titanic, fat, and much bigger than life. If Vince McMahon set the stage, Zahorian helped make the ring strong. Things changed though in 1991. For years the federal government had been looking into Zahorian because they thought he was using a carefully planned network to give illegal anabolic drugs to professional wrestlers. Wrestlers from all over the country were reportedly getting testosterone, decaturabulin, and Dianabol in unidentified packages. These drugs were all easy to get if you knew the right people. Zahorian was accused of selling steroids illegally on more than one occasion. During his hearing in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the names of the people who testified against him were so long that it was like reading a WWF pay-per-view lineup.